I landed at Hartsfield around 3:05 p.m., luggage dragging behind me like I'd packed every unanswered text, every missed call, every time he'd promised to circle back, and never did. My plan wasn't complicated: get in a lift, change into something clean at the airport bathroom, and walk into Thanksgiving like the tuition hold on my final semester wasn't still looming. I'd sent him the payment link 3 weeks ago, then again last Tuesday, then again this morning while boarding. He left it on read. Still, I came home. Because sometimes you show up not for the people, but for the idea of them. The driver didn't talk much, which helped. He dropped me 2 houses down like I asked, and I walked the rest of the way, rolling my bag behind me with a sound that felt louder than it should have. The house looked alive. Lights glowed through the windows, laughter tumbled out the open door, and music, upbeat, something with drums, spilled across the lawn. I paused at the foot of the driveway. There were more cars than usual, way more. I'd pictured something quiet. A few uncles, maybe shy, running barefoot, Aunt Netta's cornbread on the table, someone yelling from the kitchen to grab ice. But this felt like an event. Like they were throwing a party I wasn't told about. When I finally reached the porch, I didn't knock. The door opened on its own, and there he was, my father, carrying a tray of sweet potatoes, mid-joke with someone behind him. He froze when he saw me. Not surprised. Just annoyed. "Jade," he said, like my name tasted off. "You should have called." I swallowed. "It's Thanksgiving," I said, trying to keep it soft. "I came home." He sighed, shifting the tray in his hands. "We got a full house tonight. Seats tight." He didn't move to let me in. Just nodded toward the steps. "Hang tight for a minute, all right?" He walked back in without closing the door. I stood there, suitcase beside me, jacket collar pulled up against the breeze, listening to my family cheer for something I couldn't see. Aunt Melanie eventually appeared, wiping her hands on a floral towel. "Oh Lord, baby, come in," she said, eyes darting behind her like she didn't want to make a scene. "It's cold out." I followed her in, stepping over the threshold like I didn't belong to it. The house smelled like cinnamon and smoked meat, the kind of scent that used to feel like safety. Now it smelled like memory I wasn't invited to. Every seat around the table was filled, cousins laughing, plates passed back and forth, cornbread crumbs clinging to someone's beard. Nobody looked up. Aunt Melanie handed me a paper plate and said, "Fix yourself something before the greens disappear," but her voice had a strange tempo, like she was trying to keep it light, like my presence needed to stay small. I made my way to the kitchen, moving like I was dodging something invisible. Dad was across the room, laughing at something Uncle Roy said, his back turned like it had always been. I served myself too quickly, 1 scoop of mac, a piece of turkey, no gravy. I didn't even sit. I just stood in the corner by the water cooler, holding the plate with both hands like it might break if I set it down. I kept catching glimpses, people avoiding my eyes, refilling their cups, talking around me. Eventually, I took a breath and walked up behind him. I tapped his arm once. "Hey," I said, quietly. "Can I talk to you for a second?" His face changed. Not confused. Irritated. He stepped away from the table. "You're doing this now," he said under his breath. It's about school," I started. "They said they're going to drop me from the final semester list if the tuition isn't." That's all I got out. His hand landed fast. Hard. The kind of slap that doesn't echo so much as rearrange a room. A fork dropped. Someone gasped. My paper plate hit the floor, turkey sliding across the tiles like it wanted to leave too. "Are you serious right now?" he barked, louder now. "You show up unannounced, on a day we're hosting 30 damn people, and beg for money in the middle of dinner? Who even raised you like that?" I touched my cheek. It was burning, throbbing already, but the heat wasn't what hurt most. It was the fact that nobody stood. Nobody even said my name. I looked around the room. Uncle Roy stared at the ceiling. Aunt Melanie mouthed something that might have been "Lord, have mercy." Cousin Caleb picked at his nails. My little cousin Shy asked, too loud, why did he hit her, and someone hushed him. My chest felt like it was swelling and shrinking at once, like I'd been stretched too thin and too wide to hold. I didn't say a word. I just stepped back, left the plate where it fell, and walked toward the door. The hallway felt longer than I remembered. The front doorknob stuck for a second, Like, even the house itself wanted me to stay and take it. But I made it out. I made it to the sidewalk. I didn't cry. The night air wrapped around me, sharp and quiet. My suitcase was still where I left it, untouched. I sat down beside it, like it was the only thing in this city still holding space for me. That's when the Lincoln pulled up. Smooth. Deliberate. Headlights low. Windows tinted like secrets. It didn't park, it arrived. The passenger window rolled down slowly, and I already knew who it was before I saw his face. That voice clean, heavy, full of steel and sorrow, a cut through the cold. Jade. I looked up. Grandpa. He leaned toward the open window, scanning me slowly, then the porch, then back to me. Why are you out here this late? My voice cracked before I could stop it. They said there wasn't room. His jaw flexed once. Then he clicked the car into park, stepped out without a coat, and walked past me like he'd done this before. Walked up those steps, knocked just once, hard enough to be final. The front door opened. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. I'm sorry, what did you just say to her? And then, louder, slower, his voice split in two. Is this how I treated you? And this is how you treat your daughter? Please do us a favor, go ahead and hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. We tell the kinds of stories people live through in silence, and this is just the beginning. Grandpa stood there on the porch like time had paused just to watch him breathe. His shoulders squared the way they used to be before age started tugging at him, and my dad held that plate of mac and cheese like he suddenly forgot how hands worked. The two of them stared at each other, the warm noise of the house spilling out behind my father, every laugh and clatter rubbing against the cold air outside. Grandpa tilted his head slightly, not angry, not raised, just steady, asking, "You left your daughter sitting out here, Remy. Is that who you are now?" My dad scoffed under his breath, that small defensive sound he makes when he feels cornered, muttering, "This ain't your house to just walk into." Yet he didn't close the door. Maybe he couldn't. Grandpa stepped 1 inch closer, his voice dropping into something quiet enough that my father had to lean in to hear it, saying, "She flew across the country for you, and you served her the sidewalk." My dad's jaw clenched as though the words touched something raw, and for a second he looked younger, confused, like a kid who didn't expect consequences. I watched from the curb, fingers gripping the handle of my suitcase, feeling the cold slip under my nails as the porch light flickered once before fully turning back on. Aunt Melanie appeared behind my dad, holding a spoon dripping with gravy, blinking at Grandpa like he was a ghost she wasn't prepared to see. "Mr. Dawson, you didn't say you were coming," she said, trying a soft smile, but he didn't smile back. He simply replied, "I wasn't invited," letting the truth settle heavy between them. She shifted, embarrassed, glancing at me like she wished I'd disappear. My little cousin Shy ran up next, face shiny with leftover cranberry sauce, stopping mid-stride when he saw Grandpa. "Hey, Pop," he said, voice warm and unfiltered, and Grandpa's face softened for a moment, the crease between his brows easing as he reached to pat the boy's shoulder. The whole doorway shifted with that gesture, the energy changing slightly as people behind them paused their conversations. Grandpa asked Shy, "You having a good dinner?" Shy nodded fast, pointing inside. "We made turkey legs," then added, "Are you coming in?" And the question hit harder than he knew. Dad stepped forward sharply as if to block the boy's view, saying, "He got somewhere to be, all right," but Grandpa didn't move back. He stood exactly where he was, steady as a post. He looked past my father into the house, eyes scanning faces, decorations, the spread of food laid out on the table like abundance meant innocence. He said softly, "You had room for all these people, Remy, yet somehow your daughter couldn't fit," and the way he said it, gentle enough to hurt more deeply, made the doorway fall silent again, every voice inside dropping. Aunt Melanie cleared her throat, wiping her hands on a towel, trying to smooth the tension. "It's just a misunderstanding," she said, glancing at my dad for support, but he didn't give her any. Grandpa kept his eyes on him and asked, "Is that what we're calling this?" My dad looked away, rubbing the back of his neck, whispering, "She came without telling anyone," and the excuse floated there, weak, brittle, almost embarrassing in how quickly it crumbled. Grandpa shook his head slowly, almost pitying, murmuring, "You knew she was coming home for Thanksgiving, Everyone knew. He stepped aside then, turning briefly to look at me as if checking I was still there, then returned his gaze to my father. "Go get her," he said quietly, not a command, more like a reminder of something my father should have known without being told. My dad didn't move at first, his shoulders rising like he was swallowing pride too big to fit down his throat, and Aunt Melanie nudged him lightly, whispering, "Just bring the girl inside." After a long second, he finally stepped down from the porch, walking toward me with the stiff gait of someone doing something unwillingly. He reached me, hands shoved deep in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine as he said, "Come on," barely above a mumble, like he hoped I wouldn't hear the shame in it. I didn't stand right away, kept my hands wrapped around the suitcase handle until he added, "Your plate's inside," though we both knew that plate didn't exist until this moment. I finally rose, brushing off my jeans, my chest tight but steady. As we walked back toward the house, Grandpa waited on the porch, calm, present, watching the whole scene unfold like he'd seen this hurt coming long before I ever recognized it. I stepped inside behind him, and the heat from the kitchen hit me first, the kind that smells like cinnamon and baked ham, thick enough to blur your eyes if you're already holding back. A few people looked up as we entered, their expressions doing that quick polite reset thing, but their eyes held something else, like they'd felt the wrongness of me being outside, but decided not to name it. I kept my hood up, nodded a small hello, walked past the coat rack without hanging mine, and sat down in the corner like I was visiting, not returning. Aunt Netta tried to cover the silence with a bright, too loud voice, calling, "Jade, baby, you look tired, come get some of this dressing while it's hot," and people smiled in agreement like it was safe to resume pretending. I thanked her quietly, but stayed seated, my hands still shaking from the cold, my mouth dry even though the air was thick with gravy and steam. Grandpa was still by the door, one hand on the frame like he hadn't decided if he was staying or leaving, watching my father more than he watched me. Dad said nothing, just walked to the kitchen and came back with a paper plate he loaded himself, heavy with sides and a turkey wing placed exactly in the center, like balance could undo the damage. He handed it to me without looking directly, muttering, "There's sweet tea too," and I nodded, took the plate, and balanced it on my knees without a word. My cousin Caleb whispered across the room, "I didn't know you were coming," like it was a question, and I shrugged, offering half a smile that didn't rise past my cheeks. The table talk slowly returned, low and staggered at first, then louder, jokes circling again like a record resuming its spin. Someone passed me a roll without asking, someone else offered cranberry sauce, and I took them all, silently arranging them on the plate like this scene wasn't unraveling around me. Grandpa finally stepped in, moved toward the back of the room where Uncle Keith had left an open seat, and sat with the kind of quiet that makes you sit straighter. Nobody asked him why he was here, maybe because they didn't want to hear the answer. Dinner moved forward like it had somewhere to be, folks reaching across the table, chewing, swallowing, laughing in pieces, but the tension floated just beneath the gravy boats and casserole dishes. Grandpa barely touched his food, just sipped water from a plastic cup, his eyes drifting toward the end of the table where I sat, mostly quiet. At one point, Shai leaned over and whispered to me, "You mad at Pop or Dad?" And I smiled as gently as I could, telling him neither, because the truth felt too tangled to explain to a kid who still saw us all as good. Aunt Melanie stood to say grace again, late but insistent, holding hands across the table like we hadn't already eaten half the meal, saying something about gratitude and family and how lucky we were to be together. I kept my eyes closed during the prayer, but my jaw clenched when she said, "We thank you for the love that brought us all to this room, because it wasn't love that brought me, it was an airline ticket and a stomach too full of questions to ignore." Grandpa opened one eye during it, just one, and looked at me with something close to understanding. After the food was cleared, and people started stacking paper plates and wiping down plastic tablecloths, Dad came over, leaned in a little, and said, "You staying the night or heading back to school?" I didn't answer right away, just stared at the empty cup in my hand, then replied, "Wasn't sure I had a bed here." He sighed, deep and almost dramatic, and said, "Come on, Jade, don't make it a thing," like I'd imagined the sidewalk, the locked door, the looks. I stood up slow, stretched my legs, and said I didn't make it anything. I just showed up. He nodded once, scratched his temple like it itched, then said, "Room still got your things," and walked off before I could say thank you or ask if he meant that. Grandpa rose at the same time, walked toward me without ceremony, pulled out a small envelope from his jacket, and slid it into my palm like it was a handshake. "For school," he whispered, "books, food, whatever they forgot to ask about," and I held it without looking at the contents, because something told me it held more than money. I pocketed it quietly, said, "Thank you," and meant it. I went upstairs after most of the dishes were done, the hallway light still flickering like it always had, casting shadows across the framed photos that hadn't changed in years. My room was still there, door cracked like an afterthought, bed half made like somebody started to prepare it and got distracted, maybe halfway through caring. The air smelled like dust and old lotion. My suitcase sat untouched by the doorway where I left it, and the envelope Grandpa gave me was still in my coat pocket, warm from my hand, heavier than it looked, folded once, clean edges, no hesitation. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally opened it, fingers slow like something sacred was inside, and it wasn't just the cash, though there was a thick stack, enough to cover more than groceries. It was the note folded in with it, written in Grandpa's crooked block letters, same pen he always used. "Whatever they don't give, take care of yourself anyway. Proud of you. Pops." I read it 3 times, felt my chest ache like it wanted to crack open and cry, but I didn't. I tucked the note back in, slid it under my pillow, and lay back. The ceiling had a water stain near the corner I hadn't noticed before, wide and faint like a slow bruise, and I wondered how many things in this house were quietly falling apart, how many people knew and said nothing. The carpet was thinner near the doorway, worn from years of people standing there just long enough to deliver quick words, never long enough to stay. I heard voices downstairs again, laughter too sharp to be real, someone calling for foil, a baby crying 2 houses over. The night felt full and empty at the same time, swollen with noise. Around midnight, I heard a knock, light, deliberate, like whoever it was didn't really want to be answered. I stayed quiet at first, then said, "Yeah," and the door creaked open slowly, revealing Grandpa, holding a steaming mug, his silhouette calm in the hallway light. "You still awake?" he asked, and I sat up, legs swinging off the bed, nodding. He stepped inside, shut the door with care, handed me the mug. It was just mint tea, no sugar, but it smelled familiar. He sat on the desk chair across from me, looking around like he was measuring something before speaking. "This room still feels like you," he said after a pause, then added, "but it don't feel like they know what to do with you anymore." I didn't reply, just held the tea between both hands, the warmth steadying. He studied my face for a moment, eyes tired but clear. "You good at pretending you're fine, you know that?" I nodded slightly. "Guess I had practice," I said, voice low. He leaned back, arms crossed over his chest, sighing like the words had weight. "They forgot who you are." "I didn't," he said, and that silence after hit deeper than the words. I asked him then, "Why'd you come?" and he didn't flinch, just scratched his jaw like the answer was already sitting in his throat. "Because I knew he wouldn't do right," he said. "Because the minute I heard you were flying in and he didn't mention it, I knew he was planning to act like it didn't matter." I looked at the mug again, then asked softly, "And if you hadn't shown up?" He paused, gave me a look that didn't blink. "Then you'd still be out there," he said, and I'd never forgive myself for watching that happen again. He stood slowly after that, knees popping like old wood, and moved toward the door. "Get some sleep," he said, pausing before he opened it. "We'll talk more in the morning. You ain't going back to that school empty-handed." I nodded again, unsure how to say thank you without making it sound like he saved me. He didn't want praise, he just wanted me okay. After he left, I sat for a long time without turning the light off, listening to the house creak and settle like it always had, like it knew something had shifted and was trying to adjust. Before I went to sleep, I reached for the note again, unfolded it just once more, fingers smoothing the creases without needing to read it again. The window stayed cracked open a little, letting the cool night air drift through like memory, soft and unannounced. Downstairs, I could hear Dad's voice talking to someone on the phone, quiet but clipped, and I didn't try to hear the words, because I already knew what they were made of. Explanations dressed up as excuses, the kind you tell when you've been caught being smaller than the moment asked of you. I turned the light off. Sunlight slipped through the blinds before my eyes opened fully, soft and stretched across the wall like it wasn't rushing anything, the kind of light that makes you feel like you made it through something without realizing it. I sat up slowly, feeling the stillness in the room, the kind that usually only comes after too much has been said, or too little. Downstairs, I heard the soft clang of dishes and water running, Grandpa humming something under his breath, slow and tuneless. I got up, brushed my teeth, didn't rush, didn't check my phone, just let the morning be what it was. When I came down, he was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, washing the roasting pan like he belonged there, like it was still his house. Dad wasn't around, probably still sleeping, maybe still avoiding. Grandpa glanced up as I entered, handed me a paper towel without saying good morning, just said, dry, and I did, standing beside him while the water rushed and the quiet stretched. You leaving today? He asked finally, not looking at me. Probably around 4, I said, folding the towel between my hands. He nodded, not asking more than that, just kept scrubbing. Aunt Melanie walked in next, surprised to see me, her voice already sweet, already carrying that soft apology tone people use when they don't want to say the real thing. You sleep okay, baby? She asked, busying herself with a coffee mug she didn't need. Yeah, I said, keeping it short, and she nodded too quickly. Your dad said you're heading out later, she added, then looked at Grandpa and asked if he wanted breakfast. He shook his head. We're good, he said, for both of us. She hesitated, then excused herself, said she needed to check on the greens, though they were gone. After she left, Grandpa wiped his hands dry, then leaned back against the counter. He said anything to you this morning? I shook my head, kept folding the towel in half. Didn't expect him to, he said, voice calm. Men like him, they think silence buys them time. I looked at him then, wondering how many silences he'd let stretch too long with my dad growing up, how many things went unsaid between them, how many moments like this were waiting to repeat. You think he regrets it? I asked finally. Grandpa exhaled slowly. He regrets being seen, he said, not the doing. We sat for a while after that, eating cereal out of mismatched bowls like we'd been doing it every Saturday since I was little. It felt simple, safe even, and when Shai ran in looking for his tablet, the room felt like it used to. Later, I packed my things, didn't rush, folded the same way I had when I left for school 3 years ago, when this house still felt like something I was a part of. Grandpa waited by the door, car keys already in hand, and when Dad finally came down, hair still messy, he paused when he saw me. He looked at the bags by the door, at Grandpa holding my laptop case, then finally at me. You heading out already? He asked, like we hadn't said nothing all weekend. I nodded. Flight's at 6, I said, even though it wasn't. He stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes somewhere behind me. Safe travels, he mumbled, then turned toward the living room, like we were just two people passing each other at a station. I watched him walk away, shoulders slightly hunched, the same way mine used to be. Grandpa held the door open. Let's go, he said gently, and I followed. The ride to the airport was quiet at first, then filled with small talk about weather and food and the woman at church who still calls Grandpa Pastor Zeke even though he retired 6 years ago. He pulled up to the curb, got out, grabbed my smaller bag, then looked at me the way people do when they're choosing words carefully. You call me if you need anything, he said. I mean anything. I nodded, hugged him harder than usual, longer too. As I walked toward the terminal, I heard him call after me once, not loud, just clear, they'll learn, you hear? On the flight, I sat by the window, eyes burning but dry, thinking about the note in my pocket and the silence I left behind. Some things weren't fixed, maybe wouldn't be, but I didn't feel small anymore, didn't feel like someone who had to beg for space at a table she helped build. When we took off, I didn't look back at the city, didn't look down at the street where I stood 2 nights ago holding my suitcase like it was proof I existed. I just looked ahead, let the clouds carry me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt held.